Hello to Neil, who is the chair, and Michelle, who is the vice chair of the IOSH Fire Risk Management Group. And thank you for joining us. This quick fire interview is for those who are just starting out in their safety and health careers, who are looking to make a career change. Myself, Faye, and Josh, who are members of the IOSH Future Leaders Community Steering Group, will now ask you a few questions to provide that insight. I'm going to start with the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Neil, including how you became involved in the fire risk management?
Well, indeed, and thank you, Faye, for the question. I can certainly tell you that I'm actually the chair of the Fire Risk Management Group, a role I've actually held for just over 2 years now, having been elected at the end of 2019. It's a position I'm proud to hold, and it's something which throughout my working life, I think has taken me to the position where I am now. I actually recently retired from my role, so it's rather nice these days to be relaxed with these things. But I actually used to work for 43 years for a large global fragrance and flavour company, which might seem an odd one actually to be related to fire. But I think as we're going to be talking today, I think the whole thing about fire is the fact it covers so many different industries. I was EHS manager for something like 25 years, which is often a starting point actually for things like fire risk management that we talk about. And it comes through learning and various ways actually that it comes through from working for a company like my company as I did. I think it's true to say actually that having spent so long doing it, you see a lot of changes and things happen over that time. And fire has been one of those things, and it's certainly been a really big interest of mine, as well as my job, which I guess also puts me in a great position to actually take it forward. So 25 years of doing it, and you actually have an interest and you want to take it further. And I think the really good thing is that you can actually do that through things like the Fire Risk Management Group. And hopefully we can expand that little bit further with you and with the group today, and actually give and maybe hopefully inspire others to actually follow where I've been to, and certainly where Michelle has been to as well. And it's probably a good idea now actually to hear from Michelle. So,
thanks, Neil. So hi Faye, hi Tom, hi everybody. I'm Michelle Pitkin. I'm Neil's vice chair for the Fire Risk Management Group. Like Neil, I've held the position for the past 2 years. For myself, I started my safety career in the manufacturing industry, where I worked for around 11 years. I actually started as a SHE administrator, not actually knowing what a SHE administrator was when I applied for the position. Once I got the interview, I thought I should actually find this out, and then realised that it was around safety, health and environment. From there, as I say, I spent 11 years in manufacturing, but held a safety role as well as a management position. After working in manufacturing, I went to work in the education sector for a university, working over 3 colleges as the health, safety and fire advisor. And fire advisor is quite important, and we'll touch on that later on as to how fire fits into sort of the safety profession. But right now I work for a fire and rescue service. So again, you know, doing something that, you know, is of interest to me, fire in the fire service. What more can you do there? But I think in terms of safety and the profession and bringing fire into it, I think it can come in many forms, in many ways. It's sometimes incorporated into the safety role, sometimes it's separate, and sometimes it's even seen as a bit of a bolt-on. But I think it doesn't matter whether it's a bolt-on or it's included, you've got to have an interest in fire itself to be able to, you know, really want to make a change.
Lovely. Thanks, Michelle. And it's been good to hear more about you both and to meet you, and if we could expand a little more on what you've mentioned. So you did mention, Neil, that fire risk management is not related to one profession. So could you briefly explain what fire risk management actually covers?
Yeah, I'll start with that one, Tom, if that's all right. So yeah, I think when you say fire risk management, you just sort of think management of fire and risk, as the title says. But when you actually look more into it, it covers such a wide range of elements, you know, from the management side, which you'd expect, but planning, communication, construction, design, procedures, training. It's an all-encompassing subject, really. So it isn't just about the management of fire, but what that actually includes and the detail and how you manage that day to day. It could include audits, it could include compliance checks. So it is really widespread when you actually look at the subject as a whole. But the main purpose at the end of the day is to manage fire risk, not just to persons, you know, to people that are within the building, but the building itself. Neil, have you got anything?
Yeah, I can certainly. I think I'd like to say a bit more about it as well, because I think the trouble is, perhaps, Tom, is one of the most interesting and often asked questions actually we get. Exactly what does fire risk management mean? And Michelle's given a great outline there about what it does do. I think people often come along and they just say, oh yeah, but it's about fire safety. And I think that's a common sort of wording that you often hear. And certainly we've heard during our networking events and when we're talking to people and people ask us questions and things. It's a strange thing, you know, that it actually sort of isn't a straightforward thing. It's actually so much wider. And I think the whole point about the Fire Risk Management Group is that it's not a simple one item focused thing. Maybe like a sort of if we were talking in one industry, after all, people say, what's the fire industry, for instance? But if you actually think about it, sort of the fire industry actually is probably more about actually the supply of fire equipment and things. But it's trying to get this sort of definition right. And where Michelle says, you know, sort of the design, the management, the planning, the coordination, they're all the sort of words, in fact, that we have to use when we're talking about fire risk management. And hopefully we can sort of expand on that a little bit, of course, across the fact is you can also see now that it's not one industry, but it's a whole host of industries that we can cover. Indeed, we actually have members from across the world and indeed across the many, many industries as well.
Thank you both. There are many different roles under the banner of fire risk management. How do prospective professionals learn about the roles, undertake training and become recognised as competent?
Yeah. Again, you know, if you look at this one, Faye, I think we've said the same in these industries. Indeed, there are so many different roles out there as well. And some of them are very specific, some of them are more general, you know, and if we think about sort of the traditional way where sort of people get into fire, because, and again, we'll explore this perhaps a little bit more detail as well. If you actually think about it, actually, sort of how do people sort of get into the roles that do exist? And as I said, there's a whole host of them, a whole different ones with different titles, different names, and sometimes even if you're in a different industry, the same role can effectively have a different title as well. It's one of those strange situations you can have. I think it's true to say actually that most people, or certainly a significant number of our members, if you look at their backgrounds and things, you find that they actually started off as OSH professionals, which of course therefore means actually that it's something which you can move into and actually develop throughout your career. If I look at mine, for instance, I said to you that I worked for a company for 43 years, and it was actually the same company. Obviously, I changed my role throughout it, and therefore, of course, this is the same way that in anything, any people can develop their roles and things. I actually spent 25 years of that as an OSH professional, and indeed probably 20 years of that actually as an OSH plus fire professional. So whilst you might say actually it's not strictly a role that you would see written on a job application, for instance, although I have to say that is changing because you are now starting to see it. When I started, the point was you became an OSH professional and then you developed into a role. And fire, of course, being one of those things. Again, a little bit about sort of my pointer was that my site was actually a upper tier coma site. So that some people would know that as a Seveso site, but what it means is it's a high hazard site. As a high hazard site dealing with lots of flammable materials, of course, you have to start to specialize in things like fire. So my role actually developed through, and indeed, I know many of the members, many of my committee members, and indeed, I suspect that Michelle can add a bit more to this in a minute as well. But you can see actually how the roles and things actually do tend to develop. And it's always a case about trying to keep one step ahead. Unfortunately, of course, as we all know, in all the countries and things where we're represented and things, you have legislation. Legislation, of course, is one of those things that's always going to be a driver to a role such as ours. You know, you go back to things like the Regulatory Reform Order of 2005 and the massive change that actually made to fire. Increased responsibilities, increases changes and things meant that the OSH professional with fire background and things had to actually change their role anyway. So fire became more of a specialism. And whilst I'm saying that's way on, there are a lot of people, of course, who actually have developed that to the point now where fire is their own role that they take on. So that may be something like fire risk assessor, a fire engineer or something along those lines as well. Michelle, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I think you've absolutely spot on, Neil. I think, you know, I can relate to that. So for myself, as I say, I joined a company without knowing what this she role was, but it actually turned out to be one of the most diverse roles that I've actually had, because I started with this company with no formal qualifications. I'd not even done my IOSH managing safely, and this organisation obviously saw you know, something in me, and you know, I was really lucky in that they took me on, and I was there for 11 years. But with that, they put me through my IOSH, they put me through my NEBOSH general certificate. That standard sort of process that most safety professionals go through. And then from that, as Neil said, the role then starts to develop. Organizations or businesses, or, you know, even as an individual, you start to look at other areas. And although fire now is mainly incorporated into that role of a health and safety professional, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it can be seen as a bit of a bolt-on. So you do health and safety and fire. Although fire is very much part of health and safety, I would say that it's seen as very much a standalone area because it is a specialist area. And I think now, and not so much when I started out around sort of 16 years ago, there are apprenticeship schemes that you can join if you are struggling to find your way into the safety profession. Shadowing, you know, if you know somebody that works within the industry, that you can go and spend a day with somebody to sort of see what the world of safety is really like. If you're not too sure, you don't know how to get started, you know, use people that you might know to have those conversations and just sort of say, hey, can I come and spend the day with you? You know, if you know people on the fire risk management group committee, talk to us, you know, ask the questions. How did you get started? You know, this webinar, for example, hopefully, you know, it's giving you some insight as to, you know, the ways that you can get into fire, into safety. But I think, you know, as Neil said, over time you find the things that are of interest to you and the direction that you want to go in. And sometimes it might be fire, sometimes it could be vibration and noise, for example. But with that comes specialist training, because they are specialist subjects. So whilst you have your general NEBOSH, for example, obviously there are other qualifications out there, but that gives you the foundation to then move forward into the other areas that you might want to develop as a specialist.
Oh, that's really good. It's really good to hear how you can get into the OSH role, but also the fire role as well. So, and we've talked about the many industries that it kind of affects. So what, if we can be more specific, what industries are covered by the risk management group? What OSH roles do you see? What fire roles do you see? And is fire safety always necessarily part of the OSH roles within those various industries?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'll take that one first, Neil, if you don't mind. So as we've established, you know, fire risk management group, you know, the IOSH fire risk management group, we cover every industry going. You know, fire doesn't target specific industries. It doesn't target, you know, specific size businesses or certain types of, you know, work environments. So the fire risk management group very much covers every industry that is out there. And as Neil mentioned earlier, you know, the fire risk management group committee, we have a diverse range of industries that are represented within the committee, but also our group members as well. You know, they come from a wide range of industries across the world. I think just going back to myself, you know, and my own experiences, when I started in manufacturing, it wasn't, fire wasn't part of the role. It came later. When I worked in education, it wasn't part of the role. There was actually a fire advisor for one of the particular colleges, and at a second college that I worked at, it was managed by somebody else, but we worked closely together because there is that link between safety and fire. But then, as I say, some businesses may see that, you know, their advisor or their coordinator has that all-encompassing role, and they actually take on everything. Now, depending on the size of the business or the risk level of the business, as Neil mentioned earlier about a coma site, it might be that you actually have more than one individual looking after that specialist area, but overall they work under one team to bring it all together. Neil?
Yeah, I think you pretty well summed it up there, Michelle. I think I've covered nearly everything. I think actually, if I look at the committee that we actually have, you know, sort of Michelle sort of indicated it, you know, when I think about their backgrounds and the industries to which they're working from and the ones they've worked in and things, and I think, you know, we've got everybody from an ex sort of HSE inspector right the way through to aircraft people. We have people who have worked in education. We've got people who are looking after sort of college student accommodation and things. So it goes to show this really is covering just about every sort of industry, role, sort of everything that literally there were. Fires, you know, unfortunately, you know, we see too many things still coming through. We still see fires occurring. And whether it's sort of a production site in India, in this country, or it's anything, you know, you think about it, you think to yourself, it has to be part of the industry these days. So you can't move away from it. So I think in reality, basically, Tom, it's a question which actually has to be answered by, actually, we cover all industries. You know, there isn't one that I can think of actually where you really don't need to have some form of sort of fire risk management involved in it as part of that work.
Thank you both. Career paths have briefly been discussed throughout the interview, but what career paths are available to prospective OSH future leaders in the fire risk management?
Okay, so let me take that one as well, because I think actually it sort of leads on from where we've been coming from previously as well. You know, we said to you actually that most people, or indeed sort of the most people that I know of actually, and again, we're talking of experience here, and the experience which I think is important to people's, because it is real life. I've come up through industry. Michelle's come up through industry, but she's now working for a fire service, which is very different. But in fact, it also actually has its own side to it as well. When I think, as I said to you, my role was one which basically sort of became part of fire, or fire became part of it. It sort of, it wasn't something I set out to do. However, I knew that when I did my NEBOSH certificate, my NEBOSH diploma and things, that the part in it which really interested me and actually sort of really got me going actually was fire. Now, some people might say that's a very strange thing to be saying, but actually fire was actually more about actually the understanding of fire and actually one of the things that we've been trying to do actually as a group is hold a series of webinars recently, 6 webinars, which actually was aimed at very much at future leaders and as we go forward. And I think we tried to do that to actually show that the role is one of progression. It tends to be progression. Now, that's even the case that if you join from, let's take a subject, you know, where people might say, well, actually, I'm in the fire service at the moment. And Michelle might want to add something to this in a minute. But if you think you're in the fire service, in fact, can you actually move to different roles within industry or even as independents that you can take on? So the progression actually as it moves on could be that and certainly I know of experience and I know of people who've done it, you move out the actual fire service as a serving firefighter or something, but actually you take your knowledge, your skills and your experience and you move on actually to look at things like fire risk assessors, okay, which is certainly a growing area that is needed. Okay, you could say actually we're really talking about independent people here, but not necessarily. Part of my role actually when I worked within industry was actually I had to be my own fire risk assessor. I had to be competent, I had to go through the learning and I had to have the experience and things as well, you know, and it really is a wide range. So it really is one of progression. And I think there's very few people who would actually say that actually what I actually set out to do was become part of fire risk management. Fire safety, understandable. You can go into fire safety sort of with different roles. But I think fire risk management, where we're coming from, tends to be actually a progressional thing, so that you would move on from a first stage, then it becomes an interest, then it becomes part. And again, like me, after all, my workplace and with the changes in it sort of pushed me in the direction that I needed to go. Michelle.
Yeah, no, I think this time you've covered pretty much everything there, Neil. I think you know the again, just my own experiences really just echo what Neil was saying there, in that as I previously mentioned, you know, you start with that basis, that foundation of IOSH, managing safely. You move to the NEBOSH general certificate, and then you're then trying to learn, you're then trying to put all this learning that you've been given into practice. You're trying to find your own feet, you're trying to find your own way of working and your own identity in this big world of safety and of the industry that you're working in. And I think that in itself takes time, but then with that time you then start to look at other areas. As Neil mentions, it might be that the organization kind of moves you gently into the next area that you develop in. It might be that, you know, you have an interest in something and then you just naturally progress into the next level of training. So, you know, NEBOSH Fire, for example, or you might then look at some training with the IFE, and you do some fire specific training with them. I think, you know, whatever path you take, the most important thing is that you enjoy it.
Yeah, brilliant. No, and it's you've really piqued our interest, and I'm sure you've piqued the interest of some other prospective professionals. So if anyone does want to get more involved with the fire risk management group of IOSH, what do they need to do? And what kind of networking opportunities exist if we were to get involved?
I'm going to try not to talk too much about this, Tom, because I could spend a long time talking about this, and I see Neil smiling there. But yeah, I could talk about us and what we do for a very long time. But I think, you know, that we obviously have our own events. So we hold our own webinars that we, you know, welcome anybody to attend. As Neil mentioned, we've just recently held the 6 webinars on the Back to Basics series, but what we found is that they were actually really good refreshers for people that had been in the profession for slightly longer. So they were a benefit from not just, you know, future leaders, but for people like ourselves that have been doing it for you know, a few more years. You have future leaders conferences, you've got webinars, you've got group events. There are people on the committee that will happily talk to anybody that is interested in moving into fire, or it could be that, you know, later down the line they're interested in becoming a committee member and they want to find out what it's like to be a committee member. What do we actually do? We're, you know, we will happily talk to anybody that is interested in doing that, or just really wants to find out more about what fire risk management actually is.
Yeah.
Neil?
Yeah, let me just sort of finish this one off, because Michelle actually is sort of hiding slightly here behind a bushel, as they used to say, because actually she actually runs a communications group, which we actually have within the Fire Risk Management Group Committee. And I think it goes to show actually the real interest out there actually in fire risk management. I think is sort of really shown when we look at the fact that we started a LinkedIn group. And what I would say is actually one way of really working with us is actually look at our social media position. LinkedIn is a great one actually, and you know, we started it up 2 years ago. And when I think about the fact that we now have over 18,000 followers, I think it probably shows people actually that this is a great way that we can actually talk and you can learn, because what we do through that is we don't just sort of say, okay, it's a chance for you to talk to us, but actually we give you pointers. We tell you about what's going on in the world. We will tell you about sort of what's going on locally. But remember, we're international. We're a global group as part of IOSH. And as such, you know, we want to make sure actually that we're sort of giving things that people interest. Now that interest hopefully will therefore spark our members' interest and certainly the future leaders, if they want to have a look, and if they haven't done so, have a look on those LinkedIn and the Twitter feeds that we actually have, and just see actually, because in there's a lot of pointers about what is going on and how people can get involved. And I think, you know, as we move sort of on, when you get the chance at face-to-face meetings and things, as Michelle said, and I can't emphasize this more, but actually I have a wonderful committee, and every one of them, as Michelle has said, is very, very sort of happy to talk to anybody. If you've got questions, please contact us. You know, this is really sort of important to the group, and hopefully we can bring those sort of future leaders into the world of fire risk management in the future.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And it's great to hear your enthusiasm and passion about it. Well, that actually brings us to the end of our quick fire interview. We thank the chair and co-chair of the IOSH Fire Risk Management Group, Michelle and Neil, for being with us and for sharing that really useful information. And hopefully that will have inspired many new to the OSH profession.
Indeed. And can I just sort of add, finally, Tom, after I think we've said it already, Michelle and myself have actually sort of said, look, we welcome the future leaders to get in contact and things with us. It's a really great opportunity, thank you, that you've given us to actually talk to those future leaders. And certainly, hopefully, we've sort of got you thinking and got them thinking about actually what we are and what we stand for as well. So there's sure to be some other questions and things as well. And can I just sort of encourage people that you can either go onto the social media things that I've spoken about and just look for the IOSH Fire Risk Management Group on there. But also, if you've got any questions and things that we haven't answered today, but you think you'd like to know the answers, then please send them to networks@iosh.com, and we will certainly see them, and Michelle and myself, or indeed, actually, I work as part, my committee is a team. We're just two members of a team, and I will actually sort of encourage, and I know I wouldn't need to encourage them more to actually answer any questions and things that people have. So we'd be pleased to hear from them, and hopefully we could sort of pass on our information to them in the future. So thank you once again for giving us this opportunity today.
Lovely. Thank you both, and thanks, Faye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.